A heavy metal concert feels like a battle, but the real wars are often fought off stage. These musicians gave everything to their fans, but their final chapters were filled with unbelievable twists of fate. To put it mildly, some of these stories are stranger than fiction, like the star lost to a joyride gone wrong. 1. Dimebag Darrell. Many people are crazy about the feeling of a live concert. It's supposed to be a safe space, a place where the outside world melts away, and the only thing that matters is the music. But on December 8, 2004, that safe space was shattered forever. The Alrosa Villa nightclub in Columbus, Ohio, was packed with fans eager to see Damage Plan, the new band from legendary Pantera brothers Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul. The energy was electric as the band took the stage. But just moments into the first song, the unthinkable happened. A man stormed the stage, moving with a terrifying purpose. Before anyone could react, he targeted Dimebag Darrell, one of the most beloved and influential guitarists in heavy metal history. The happy sounds of rock and roll turned into screams of panic. The thing nobody tells you is just how fast everything went down. It was a chaotic and horrific scene that ended the life of a true icon at just 38 years old. Dimebag wasn't just a musician. He was known for his huge smile, his generous spirit, and his love for his fans. His passing wasn't just a loss, it was a violation. It changed concert security forever, leaving a dark stain on the heart of heavy metal. To put it mildly, the music world was in shock for months. The tragedy was a direct, senseless act of violence. But sometimes a rock star's end comes not from a person, but from a simple twist of fate on a lonely road. 2. Cliff Burton. In the world of heavy metal, some musicians are just on another level. Cliff Burton, the bassist for Metallica, was one of them. He was a true artist, a classically trained musician who brought a level of melody and complexity to the bass guitar that the genre had never seen before. He was the soul of the band during their rise to superstardom, a key creative force behind masterpieces like Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. In 1986, Metallica was on top of the world, touring Europe and winning over legions of new fans every night. They were young, powerful, and felt invincible. But on a cold September night in rural Sweden, that feeling of invincibility came to a devastating end. The band was traveling overnight on their tour bus. To decide who got which bunk, the members drew cards. Cliff won the poker draw with an ace of spades, choosing the bunk that guitarist Kirk Hammett had been using. What many overlooked was that this simple game of chance was a fatal one. In the early morning hours, the bus driver lost control on an icy patch of road. The bus swerved violently and flipped over, throwing Cliff out of the window. The bus then landed on top of him. He was gone in an instant at the age of just 24. The loss of his creative genius left a hole in Metallica that can never be filled. Losing a bandmate to a freak accident is devastating. But what about losing a genius to a moment of pure, reckless stupidity? 3. Randy Rhoads. Sometimes a talent comes along that is so bright, it feels like it's from another planet. Randy Rhoads was that kind of talent. After making a name for himself with the band Quiet Riot, he joined Ozzy Osbourne's new solo band and changed the world of rock guitar forever. In just 2 albums, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, Randy fused classical music with heavy metal in a way no one had ever heard before. He was a dedicated musician who practiced for hours every day, a quiet and humble genius who was poised to become one of the greatest guitarists of all time. In March of 1982, the band was on tour in Florida, heading to a festival. They stopped at a property owned by the tour bus company to fix an air conditioning unit. The property had a small airport with a few planes. The bus driver, who also had a pilot's license, decided to take a small single-engine plane for a joyride. The thing nobody tells you is that the pilot had a history of poor judgment. He took a couple of band members up in the plane and started buzzing the tour bus, flying dangerously low to the ground to scare the people still inside. On the 3rd flight, with Randy and a makeup artist on board, things went horribly wrong. One of the plane's wings clipped the top of the tour bus, sending it spiraling out of control. It crashed into a nearby house and burst into flames. Randy Rhoads was only 25 years old. His death was a completely pointless tragedy that robbed the world of decades of amazing music. A sudden, violent end is one kind of tragedy, but another kind is watching a star slowly fade away right before our eyes. 4. Layne Staley. The 1990s gave us a new wave of heavy music from Seattle, and the voice of that movement belonged to Layne Staley. As the frontman for Alice in Chains, his powerful, haunting, and one-of-a-kind vocals defined a generation. His voice was filled with a raw pain that was impossible to fake. Songs like Man in the Box and Rooster were massive hits, and the band became one of the biggest in the world. Layne was a charismatic frontman, but behind the scenes, he was fighting a long and difficult battle with his personal demons. You see, as the years went on, Layne's struggles became more and more public. The band stopped touring because his health was so poor. He became a recluse, hiding away in his Seattle apartment, a ghost of his former self. What many overlooked was the deep sadness and isolation he was feeling. He rarely saw his friends or bandmates, and the vibrant star who once commanded stadiums was slowly disappearing from the world. In April of 2002, the police were called to his home after his family hadn't heard from him in weeks. They found that he had passed away. To put it mildly, his body had been there for about 2 weeks. He was only 34 years old. His passing was a heartbreaking end to a long, slow, and public decline, a tragic loss of a voice that will never be replaced. Layne's story is one of a slow fade into darkness. But other rock legends went out with a bang, living life at full speed until the very end. 5. Bon Scott. Before AC/DC was a global powerhouse filling stadiums, they were a raw, hungry rock and roll band led by the one and only Bon Scott. Bon was the ultimate frontman. He had a mischievous grin, a wild look in his eyes, and a voice that was pure, high-voltage rock and roll. He was a poet of the streets, writing lyrics about having a good time, chasing women, and living life with no regrets. He was the heart and soul of the band's early years, the voice behind classics like Highway to Hell and TNT. He lived the life he sang about, and he was famous for his love of a good party. In February of 1980, that lifestyle finally caught up with him. After a night of heavy drinking in London, a friend drove him home. But Bon had passed out in the car and his friend couldn't move him. The thing nobody tells you is that his friend made the fateful decision to just leave him in the car to sleep it off. The next morning, Bon was found unresponsive. At the hospital, he was pronounced gone at the age of 33. The official cause was acute alcohol poisoning. It was a classic rock and roll tragedy, an ending that almost seemed like it was written in one of his own songs. The band was devastated and considered breaking up, but they ultimately decided to carry on, knowing it's what Bon would have wanted. Bon Scott's end was a tragic accident born from a wild lifestyle. But the next story involves a dark act that was no accident at all. 6. Euronymous. In the cold, dark forests of Norway, a new and extreme form of heavy metal was born in the early 90s. It was called black metal, and the band at the center of it all was Mayhem. Their leader was a guitarist who called himself Euronymous. He was more than just a musician. He was a revolutionary who wanted to create the most evil, terrifying music the world had ever heard. He opened a record store called Helvete, which means hell in Norwegian, and it became the headquarters for the new black metal scene. Euronymous had a dark and controlling personality, and he created a dangerous image for his band and the entire genre. But not all things are what they seem. While he preached about evil and darkness, the real danger was brewing right inside his own circle. In August of 1993, Euronymous was confronted at his apartment in Oslo by Varg Vikernes, another musician in the scene who played bass for Mayhem for a short time. What started as a confrontation escalated into a brutal act of violence. Varg ended Euronymous' life in a shocking and grisly manner. He was just 25 years old. The whole affair turned the underground music scene into a media circus, full of stories of church burnings and dark rituals. It was a tragic end for a musical pioneer, a story where the scary image became all too real. The story of Euronymous is dark and twisted, but it's only half the story of Mayhem's tragedy, which began with their even more disturbed vocalist. 7. Per Dead Olin. Before the infamous end of Euronymous, the band Mayhem had a frontman who truly lived up to his stage name, Dead. Per Olin, known as Dead, was a Swedish singer who joined Mayhem in 1988. To say he was an unusual performer is an understatement. He was obsessed with the idea of passing away. He would wear corpse paint on stage to make himself look like he was no longer living. The thing nobody tells you is the lengths he would go to for his image. He was known to bury his stage clothes in the dirt for weeks so they would have the smell of the grave. He even had a dead crow in a bag that he would smell before shows to get the scent of demise in his nostrils. His bandmates knew he was a troubled soul, prone to deep depression and strange behavior. He lived in a remote house in the woods with the other band members, and his mental state grew worse and worse. In April of 1991, at the age of just 22, Dead decided to end his own journey. He left a short note and then took his own life in a very graphic way. What many overlooked, or rather, what became part of the dark legend, is what happened next. His bandmate Euronymous found his body, but before calling the police, he took a camera and took pictures of the scene. One of those pictures was later used as the cover for a bootleg Mayhem album, cementing the band's reputation as the most extreme and controversial in music history. The Mayhem story is a tale of a scene spiraling out of control. But sometimes, a musician's passing is simply a heartbreaking. 8. Chuck Schuldiner. In the world of extreme metal, the name Chuck Schuldiner is spoken with a kind of holy reverence. As the leader, guitarist, and vocalist of the band Death, he wasn't just a pioneer, he was the creator of an entire genre. He took the raw energy of thrash metal and pushed it into a faster, heavier, and more technical direction, essentially inventing what we now know as death metal. But Chuck was never one to stand still. Over the years, he evolved his sound, creating some of the most complex and beautiful progressive metal ever recorded. He was a true visionary, a genius who was always pushing the boundaries of his music. But in 1999, at the height of his creative powers, Chuck received a devastating diagnosis. He had a rare form of brain cancer. This is why this is huge. The American healthcare system became his biggest enemy. He had insurance, but the company refused to pay for the life-saving treatments he needed. The metal community rallied around him, putting on benefit concerts and raising money to help pay his massive medical bills. He fought the illness with incredible courage and dignity for 2 years, even continuing to write music for his other band, Control Denied. Sadly, the battle was too much. Chuck passed away in December of 2001. He was only 34 years old. His death was a massive blow to the music world, a loss made even more tragic by the financial struggles he had to endure just to fight for his life. Losing a legend to a long illness is a slow-motion tragedy. But the next story is about a star whose end came in a flash, in a fire that should never have happened. 9. Ty Longley. Great White was a hard rock band that hit it big in the late 80s and early 90s. They were known for their bluesy sound and hit songs like Once Bitten, Twice Shy. Like many bands from that era, they continued to tour for years, playing for their dedicated fan base in clubs all across the country. In February of 2003, they were booked to play a show at the Station nightclub in West Warwick, Rhode Island. The club was a small, intimate venue, packed with around 400 fans. Guitarist Ty Longley had only been with the band for a few years, but he was a key part of their live show. The night of the show, the band started their set with a bang, using pyrotechnics, which are like small, controlled fireworks, to get the crowd excited. But the thing nobody tells you is that the club was not prepared for this. The sparks from the pyrotechnics instantly ignited the cheap foam soundproofing on the walls and ceiling behind the stage. Within seconds, the entire stage was engulfed in flames. Panic erupted as the thick, black smoke filled the small club. People rushed for the exits. But the main entrance became a bottleneck. It was a complete nightmare. 100 people lost their lives in the fire, including the talented guitarist Ty Longley. He was only 31. The station nightclub fire remains one of the worst tragedies in rock history, a horrific reminder of how quickly a night of fun can turn into a disaster. A fire is a horrifying way to go. But what if the tragedy happens in the one place you're supposed to be safest? Your own bed. 10. Vinnie Paul. The Abbott brothers were royalty in the world of heavy metal. After the tragic end of his brother Dimebag Darrell, Vinnie Paul carried the torch for their legacy. As the powerhouse drummer for Pantera and later Hell Yeah, Vinnie was known for his massive groove and thunderous playing. But more than that, he was known for being one of the nicest and most generous guys in the business. After his brother's passing, he made it his mission to keep the spirit of rock and roll alive. He was always seen with a smile on his face, hosting parties and making sure everyone around him was having a good time. He was the heart of the metal community in many ways. For years, fans held out hope for a Pantera reunion, a dream that Vinnie himself never completely ruled out. He continued to tour and make music with Hell Yeah, carrying the weight of his brother's memory with him everywhere he went. Then, in June of 2018, the metal world was hit with another devastating blow. Vinnie Paul had passed away in his sleep at his home in Las Vegas. He was 54 years old. The news was a complete shock to everyone. What many overlooked was that he had a serious heart condition. The official report said he passed from dilated cardiomyopathy, a condition where the heart becomes enlarged and can't pump blood effectively, along with coronary artery disease. It was a quiet, peaceful end for a man known for making loud, aggressive music, and a second heartbreaking tragedy for one of metal's most important families. Losing one brother was a tragedy. Losing the second was a nightmare. But some bands had to deal with the loss of a member who was gone long before he actually passed away. 11. Jeff Hanneman. Slayer is one of the big four of thrash metal, a band known for its uncompromising speed, aggression, and dark subject matter. A huge part of their signature sound came from the twisted and brilliant mind of guitarist Jeff Hanneman. He wrote the music and lyrics for some of the band's most iconic songs, including Angel of Death and Raining Blood. His guitar riffs were like lightning strikes, and his solos were pure chaotic noise. He was the dark heart of Slayer, a quiet and private man who channeled his intensity into his music. But in 2011, a bizarre and seemingly minor incident changed his life forever. He was bitten by a spider in a friend's hot tub. This is why this is huge. The bite led to a horrifying case of necrotizing fasciitis, a rare flesh-eating disease that nearly cost him his arm. He had to have multiple surgeries and skin grafts, and he was left in a weakened state. He was never able to fully rejoin the band on tour. For 2 years, he struggled with his health. Then, in May of 2013, he passed away. While everyone assumed his passing was related to the spider bite, the official cause was alcohol-related cirrhosis of the liver. The thing nobody tells you is that his bandmates didn't even know how serious his drinking problem had become. He was only 49, and his passing marked the end of an era for one of metal's most legendary bands. A bizarre medical issue is a shocking way to lose a star. But what about a musician who seemed to have it all and then suddenly was gone? 12. Chris Cornell. The voice of Chris Cornell was a force of nature. As the frontman for Soundgarden, he was one of the architects of the Seattle grunge scene. He could let out a powerful, primal scream one moment and then sing a soft, beautiful melody the next. He was a true rock god, with movie star good looks and a stage presence that was second to none. After Soundgarden broke up, he had a successful solo career and formed another huge band, Audio Slave. He had a beautiful family and was beloved by millions of fans around the world. In 2010, Soundgarden reunited, and it felt like they were back where they belonged. In May of 2017, the band was on tour and had just finished a powerful show in Detroit. By all accounts, Chris was in good spirits and the show was fantastic. But just a few hours later, the world was stunned by the news that he was gone. He was found unresponsive in his hotel room after the concert. He was only 52 years old. The news was a complete shock, as there were no public signs that he was in distress. His passing was a heartbreaking reminder that you never truly know what someone is going through behind closed doors. It left a massive hole in the world of rock music, silencing one of its most iconic and powerful voices forever. The sudden loss of Chris Cornell left fans reeling, and just a couple of months later, the music world was hit with another eerily similar tragedy. 13. Chester Bennington. For a generation of fans who grew up in the 2000s, Linkin Park was more than just a band. They were a lifeline. Their music, a powerful blend of metal, rock, and hip-hop, spoke to a feeling of teenage angst and frustration that was felt all over the world. At the center of that sound was the incredible voice of Chester Bennington. He could sing with a soft, melodic vulnerability, and then unleash a scream of pure, raw emotion that could shake you to your core. He was an electrifying performer and a deeply thoughtful and sensitive person. The band had just released a new album, One More Light, and was preparing for a huge world tour. Chester was known to have had his struggles in the past, but he had always been very open about them. He was also a very close friend of Chris Cornell, and he was hit especially hard by his passing. To put it mildly, he even sang a beautiful and heartbreaking version of the song Hallelujah at Chris's memorial service. Then, on July 20th, 2017, the day that would have been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday, tragedy struck again. Chester was found at his home in California. He had taken his own life. He was only 41. The news was absolutely devastating, a second seismic shock to the music world in just a few short months. It was another painful reminder of the silent battles that so many people fight every day. The losses of Chris and Chester were shocking because they seemed to have so much to live for. But our next star was a Gothic giant who seemed to cheat his own end for years. 14. Peter Steele. There was no one in music quite like Peter Steele. He was the frontman for the Gothic metal band Type O Negative, and he was a true giant, both literally and figuratively. He stood at a towering 6 feet, 8 inches tall, with long black hair, fangs, and a deep, booming voice that could sound both menacing and romantic. His lyrics were full of dark humor, sarcasm, and a kind of Gothic romance that was all his own. He created a unique world with his music, one that was perfect for a gloomy October day. He was also known for his wild sense of humor and for not taking himself too seriously, even once posing for Playgirl magazine. You see, Peter had a long history of personal struggles. He was very open about his battles with depression and his unhealthy habits. He even wrote songs about it. The thing nobody tells you is that he had a habit of playing pranks on his fans and the media. On the band's website one time, they even posted a picture of a tombstone with his name on it, leading many to believe he had actually passed away. So when the news broke in April of 2010 that he had really passed away, many fans thought it was just another joke. But this time, it was real. He had died of heart failure at the age of 48. It was a sudden and shocking end for a man who seemed larger than life, a dark prince who had finally met his match. Peter Steele was a one-of-a-kind character, but our next story is about a band that was full of characters, all hidden behind terrifying masks. 15. Paul Gray. Slipknot crashed into the music scene at the end of the 90s like a 9-person wrecking ball. They were an anonymous, terrifying force of nature from the middle of Iowa. Dressed in boiler suits and grotesque masks, they created a sound that was pure, chaotic energy. They were a band of brothers, a tight-knit unit that they called the Nine. Each member had a number, and bassist Paul Gray was number 2. He was also known as the Pig. Paul was more than just the bassist. He was one of the main songwriters and a founding member of the band. He was considered by his bandmates to be the heart and soul of Slipknot. The band had achieved massive global success, but behind the masks, they were all dealing with the pressures of fame. Paul, in particular, had a history of struggling with his personal demons. In May of 2010, the metal community was rocked by terrible news. Paul had been found in a hotel room in Urbandale, Iowa, not far from his home. He was only 38 years old. The cause of his passing was an accidental overdose of substances he should not have been taking. The next day, the remaining 8 members of the band held a press conference, unmasked for the first time, to pay tribute to their fallen brother. It was a raw and incredibly emotional moment that showed the world the real human beings behind the terrifying masks. The loss of Paul Gray was a blow to one of modern metal's biggest bands. But our next tragedy involves a young star from an even heavier band who met his end on a lonely highway. 16. Mitch Lucker. In the world of extreme music, a new genre called deathcore emerged in the 2000s, and the band at the forefront of that movement was Suicide Silence. Their frontman was a young, heavily tattooed singer named Mitch Lucker. He was a force of nature on stage, with a commanding presence and a scream that was absolutely ferocious. The band was one of the most popular in the scene, and Mitch was seen as a leader and an icon for a new generation of metal fans. He was a young father and a devoted husband, a man who seemed to have a bright future ahead of him. But on Halloween night in 2012, that future was cut tragically short. Mitch was seen out riding his motorcycle in Huntington Beach, California. What many overlooked is that he had been struggling with alcohol that evening. He lost control of his powerful motorcycle and crashed into a light pole. He was rushed to the hospital, but his injuries were too severe. Mitch Lucker passed away in the early morning hours of November 1st. He was only 28 years old. His passing sent a massive shockwave through the metal community. Thousands of fans gathered for a candlelight vigil in his honor. The band later held a massive tribute concert to raise money for his young daughter's education. It was a devastating end for a rising star, a cautionary tale about the dangers of a single bad decision. Mitch Lucker's passing was a sudden, violent tragedy. But some losses in metal history are so bizarre, they sound like they were made up. 17. The Reverend. Avenged Sevenfold is a band that has never been afraid to evolve. They started out as a metalcore band and grew into one of the biggest hard rock acts in the world, playing epic songs in sold-out arenas. A huge part of their unique sound and personality came from their drummer, Jimmy Sullivan, who was known to everyone as the Reverend. He was a wildly talented and creative musician. He wasn't just a drummer, he was also a gifted piano player, a vocalist, and one of the band's primary songwriters. He was known for his crazy antics and his larger-than-life personality. He was the band's wild card, a creative genius who was always pushing them in new directions. But the Rev also had a dark side. He battled with his personal demons for years, a struggle that was well known to his close friends and family. This is why this is huge. He had an enlarged heart, a condition he had known about since he was young, which made his lifestyle even more dangerous. On December 28, 2009, he was found unresponsive at his home. He was only 28 years old. The cause of his passing was a lethal combination of prescribed medications and alcohol. It was a heartbreaking end for a musician who was bursting with so much talent and creativity. The band was shattered, but they honored their friend by having his favorite drummer, Mike Portnoy, record the drum parts for their next album, Nightmare, which became a tribute to their lost brother.